Hello and welcome to Hyper Live. And today we have a very special guest. Welcome, Dave King, co-founder, partner at Move37. And our topic for today is AI's impact on creativity in the creative field. So before we kick off, I'll pass over to Daniel if you'd like to do some intros, and then Dave, it'd be great to hear a little bit about your background before we jump into the topic.
G'day everyone, it's Daniel here, founder of Great CTO, and also do a lot of work with Gareth and the Hyper team. So yeah, and looking forward to catching up with my old mate Dave King. So welcome to the show, Dave.
Thanks for having me, guys. Great to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a bit about yourself, Dave. You're co-founder, partner at Move37. What does Move37 do? And obviously you're close to the creative industry. What's your experience?
So Move37 is a AI product studio. We work with sort of small to medium, large businesses, mostly here in Australia, helping them understand, their AI journey, get on board with what they're planning, how they're going to take advantage of these incredible new capabilities. So building systems, tools, workflows, applications. And, I guess educating, inspiring and providing a guiding light on how enterprise can, lean into this. And it's a combination of building. So we are, our CTO, my co-founder, Pan Demastinos, is one of Australia's most respected AI architects and has done an incredible job at building a culture of AI engineering internally here at Move37. So we're a lot of engineers. And the term AI engineer is only probably, a year or two old. And those are the people we're attracting. We've just hired someone from OpenAI, which is pretty exciting. And so, we are the trusted partners, conciliaries and builders to help large enterprise, really sort of start to take advantage of this. And most of our client partners are either witnessing some form of disruption or it's on the horizon. And so it's a lot of interesting conversations we're having. And previous to that, I started a creative agency in Melbourne and Sydney called The Royals, which is still going strong, in 2008. And I worked in that business for 10 years before falling in love with AI in 2017.
Wow, cool. Very early to the curve.
Yeah. And you really are at the intersection of AI and creativity there, by the sounds of it as well. So what are you observing there in terms of conversations at work, but also with your clients?
Well, I think the topic for this is pretty interesting. I think one of the key hypotheses we had when we started Move37 was in advertising. There's a pretty weird phenomenon, which is copywriters and art directors work in pairs. And so if you want to hire a copywriter, you have to hire an art director with them. And that's been the case since Bill Bernbach, who's founded DDB, Big Agency Network, kind of created that paradigm in the 1950s. And I come from outside advertising, like starting the Royals as a creative agency. I had different ambitions to not so much to create advertising, but to do interesting things with brands. So interesting technology, interesting emerging media, mischievous things, creative technology, all that kind of stuff. It grew into that as well as mainstream advertising. But for me, my background was not in that space. I've always worked in kind of internet, .coms and startups and a little bit of sort of enterprise corporate strategy stuff. So I was surprised when I found that paradigm, that sort of copywriter plus art director. I mean, everyone, Gareth, Daniel, you would love to have a wingman in your life following you around, but we don't normally get that. So I suddenly, I was reading up on AI, immersing in it 2016, 17, and looked around the agency and thought, what would it mean if each one of these people had an AI thought partner for work? And part of that was, as an agency owner, I go, oh my God, we could be like twice as productive. But also outside the agency bubble, like I said before, people don't get a wingman. They don't get a wingwoman. They don't get like a chum to work with every day. So I didn't see it as like a human substitute. I thought it was like for all the people out there who work in knowledge work, there's, apparently Gartner says about 1 billion of them globally. imagine everyone got an AI thought partner for work. So that was the, I guess, thesis for Move 37, is to create that. We worked in that space, did stacks of R&D in those early years, and in fact, that kind of seminal AI paper, Attention Is All You Need, came out in April 2017, basically the same time as we're starting the company. So that bit, our timing was very good, because that defined a new kind of neural architecture that didn't exist before April 2017, and everything changed since then. So the timing for the company was good in that respect. But we were too early to achieve our ambitions in the way we envisaged. And some of the things, I mean, I could show you mock-ups and sort of prototypes, all that kind of stuff that we got working a little bit with smaller language models, LSTM, all sorts of ancient tech. But when large language models came along, sort of, GPT 2, 3, 4, it changed everything. So we took those learnings and pivoted into helping other companies do this weird thing called AI product development. And it's, I guess, in answer to your question, Gareth, a lot of the conversations we had are not just about how to roll out AI, but what does an AI product mean, and what does AI product development mean, which is a weird combination of things. So, we all know, we've all worked in product development to some degree, but now you throw in this kind of non-deterministic technology right into the middle of that and go, by the way, this is incredible stuff, but you need to, put guardrails on it and wrangle it in order to get the right sort of outcomes out of it. And suddenly that flies in the face of all these sort of product development principles we've learned for 20, 30 years. And we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot by working on stacks of projects. So a lot of the conversations we have around kind of traditional design thinking principles, like what's desirable, feasible, and viable, and how do we understand that when someone hasn't tried it before. So a lot of the use cases, as we know, the developers or the creators of these large language models don't know how they'll perform in certain or most contexts, to be honest. You add the combination of like a subject matter expert, stacks of local data, really good guardrails and evaluations in a sort of LLM-based system. And that's a pretty niche specific context once you do all those things. And so, the idea that a company can take advantage of this stuff just requires wrangling all those pieces, experimenting, prototyping, all those things. And so it's almost that the nature of the work has changed as much as, the outcome itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And what sort of state is, so when you come to a customer, are some just completely new to it, or are some been experimenting this and then have reached out for help, or everything in between?
Yeah, I think it's kind of put it in two buckets, but the reality is it's everything in between. So they kind of, it's changed. So we started sort of working with other sort of clients late 2022, early 2023, so a few years now. The vast proportion, the phone started ringing off the hook saying, oh my God, I've just used ChatGPT. Look what it can do. What can it do for our business? And so it was a very open-ended question. And that makes sense because, no one knew. Like, we were trying to, it was kind of magic. It had this kind of incredible, almost sort of chemical serotonin hit where you type something in, you get something back immediately. And it was like a video game kind of, experience of using ChatGPT. It was completely magic. But there was a massive gap between, that experience, which was, only a result of OpenAI's partnership with Microsoft and having the Azure kind of, speed and bandwidth and sort of cloud infrastructure. And that interface, there's a massive gap between understanding for any executive what that would mean for your company. And there still is. So at the start, it was very much what might we do in AI? Over the past few years, I think people are getting a better intuition about the use cases that are kind of bubbling to the top. And that's obviously from seeing people try them in their sector or industry overseas, seeing press releases and all that kind of stuff. But there's still a big part of our job is kind of ranking, prioritizing, road mapping what you should start with and why. And some of that is AI readiness. So one of our bigger clients, realestate.com.au, has who are super competent, obviously a very progressive company, and as a technology company, have lots of AI initiatives. They've had an initiative internally which gets people really comfortable with prompting in a very safe and secure way, as well as doing these kind of product development, kind of other initiatives simultaneously. And that's one of the things I've observed, which works really well, because if you throw people into doing things and they haven't got an even spread of experience in just using the stuff as a consumer, as an individual, you run into this kind of uneven distribution of knowledge within a team. And so, yeah, I think the companies that are doing well in my observation over the last couple of years are ones that are simultaneously running at individual productivity, education, inspiration, and obviously, support from the top down, safety, and we endorse this. In fact, we compel you to do it, as well as the kind of, what does this mean for my team? What does this mean for the organisation stuff?
Yeah, it's such a broad change, isn't it? Like you say, it can impact any part of the business in different ways. I'd be curious to know, like, how do you use this internally in terms of the way you develop products or help organisations bring it in? How do you accelerate your internal processes?
It's a good question. We are obsessed about the coding tools, obviously, as an engineering kind of culture. So, the team variously uses. So some of our, particularly cybersecurity conscious clients, our guys are actually on laptops of theirs. So we're restricted to the environments that they themselves use. So we use Copilot, Cursor, Claude Code. What's the other one? Something else. Those are the sort of main three. But me, as more of a product person, I love spinning up prototypes to kick a conversation off. So I've used Claude Code a bit, but using Replit quite a lot to basically kind of go, I've got an idea. I've had these conversations with the client. They've got an idea. I can show them an interactive prototype, quite quickly and say, this is throwaway code. I'm not saying this is engineering. This is throwaway code, but it's, quicker than me using Photoshop to make a JPEG, and it's quicker than me doing a team. And I get all that iterative experience and expertise that I've developed in talking to the client over the past few weeks or whatever it is into one artifact. And then they're able to share that artifact internally. And so as long as we are successful in communicating what this is and what it isn't, this is not yet a proof of concept. This is not yet a prototype. It's just like a interactive artifact of some kind. Then that's been really useful. And I think it accelerates people's understanding of what's possible. Obviously, picture tells 1,000 words, interactive interface tells, 1,000,000 words. Show them. That's been really useful. But in general, yeah, we are really running hard at great engineering practices around augmented coding. And that's invisible to the clients. They're not fussed about it. I mean, they see better productivity, better outcomes, our ability to, respond faster, all those kind of things, but they're not interested in our methods. Occasionally we get asked to kind of help teach clients that, which we haven't really been in the business of, because we're more interested in their business problems.
Interesting. We decided that on last week's episode that Replit should almost become a verb. So they kind of,
Nice.
I'm going to Replit it up. But also they need to provide a, remember Balsamic back in the days, which had the sort of the hand-drawn wireframe look? We need Replit with those templates.
Yeah, it's funny. There's as an aesthetic guy, I can see, Lovable and all the others like spitting out a certain type of CSS and, referring to the same style thing. So you got to really force it to like have its own look and feel, which I've done. Like, I've done a few things that have, I've got actually a good interface and a good aesthetic into it. But we are. That's part of it. If the certain aspects of a project are more important than others, that needs to be involved in how you Replit things.
Yeah. There we go. It's in use. Let's set this off. Yeah.
I lovable that idea.
Oh, you completely lovable it.
So what's the tension that you see between creativity and the use of these tools? I know there's people are, I guess everybody's wondering, like, what does this AI curve look like and where are we on it? And of course that's unknowable to a certain extent. But what are the kind of concerns you see internally or with the clients you're working with?
Oh, there's heaps. It's interesting when I guess there's a difference between if you're an artist and your MO, your kind of the way you spend your days is self-expression. You have your own sort of views and perspectives and set of concerns about these tools and these models. And then there's a different set if you work in commercial creativity. There's an objective function, which is I've got to design something for a client. But then there's all the shared stuff. So the shared stuff is things like, obviously, creative people are people who work. When I say creative people, I'll separate that. Everyone's creative to a certain degree. There are people for whom the creative output is fundamental to the way they earn money. So people who work in the creative industry. So for those people, they're a lot more attuned than the average person to, the provenance of this work, where it comes from, copyright infractions, stealing styles, observable styles in particularly image and video models. So there's that. Clients are also very attuned to that and ask a lot of questions about that, but they're also super interested in the expedited process of, whipping something up quickly. I think I guess the more sophisticated sort of answer to that is that, again, it depends. I remember when we started Move 37, 2018, I did a survey of maybe 20 creative director kind of people and tried to propose how they would feel about having an AI thought partner for work. And it was a pretty ephemeral, abstract concept at that point. There was no real frame of reference except, some science fiction stuff. And it was kind of split in two camps. One completely open to it, sounds super cool. And the other one was more like threatened. And I got a sense, and it's kind of obvious in hindsight, that you can have different people doing exactly the same role, but they bring in a different part of their life or a different amount of their life into the role. And so some people, their work is nearly 100%. So if you ask them at the bar, like, who are you? I'm Dave. I'm a father of two. I'm blah, blah, blah. I'm a North Melbourne supporter. And other people go, I'm a creative director and I work for whatever. And so it's kind of almost like, the sort of ocean personality, OCA and personality archetype stuff, that there's traits inside people that make them more inherently likely to be threatened or not be threatened by AI in their creative work. And that's nothing to do with AI or the creative work. And nothing to do with AI or technology. It is to do with the creative work. And so how people lean into those tools and methods is a lot of it I've observed is as a result of who they are and how they see this work in their lives. And so you could throw any kind of technology in front of them and they'd probably, something that kind of infringed on their sense of identity, and they would have similar concerns. I think people, there's a guy named Jeremy Summers who started an AI content agency called Not Content. I think he's Australian actually, and he's kind of articulated what we've seen in these sort of augmented AI processes in creative fields, which is it's like an 80-20 rule but inverted. And so at the first 10% of any kind of job or workflow or project is very human. So people talk to people, they build relationships, they understand the job to be done, they have conversations. They create a brief, they might respond to the brief at a high level, excuse me, and then they can start pumping it into sort of an AI production pipeline. And that's where 80% of the volume of work happens. And then 10% at the end, which is, curation, selection, refinement, those kind of things. So the humans do 20%, the AI does 80%. The difference is the human's value in that is 80% and the AI value in it is 20%. And that's a very useful way of thinking about this. And what that does, if you buy into that, it shapes the way you think about building teams to do the work. It probably shapes the way clients think about, paying for the work and, how much time it takes and sort of cost-based pricing versus value-based pricing and all those kind of things. But I think that's a pretty good description, that kind of inverted 80-20 where humans are doing 80% of the work, even if it only takes 20% of the time. Because we know that large language models out of the box deliver banal, averaged out, sort of pixelated JPEG kind of views of the world and that you have to get very specific and weird and very niche and add a lot of context and examples and data and documentation, that kind of stuff, to take it out of that banal middle. And that takes an experienced, interested human to do that. And I think that was a lot of misunderstanding at the start of these models, where people kind of like, average punters who hadn't sort of come across AI before would go, give me 10 blog posts on what it's like to be a CTO. And you go, oh my God, the output's really average. And you go, well, guess what? Your prompt was pretty average as well. But there was a new paradigm for everybody. So now, obviously when we're doing prompt engineering behind the scenes and connecting workflows, there's a lot of context we're passing through. And individuals are starting to get better at understanding that if you rock up to a chat window and use a prompt like that, you're really behaving like a 10-year-old, because a 10-year-old can write those words. You need to tap into your own experience, expertise, intuition, and be able to communicate what your gut feel is and what your knowledge is and your experiences in order to make the outputs more you and more ownable.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a lot of your sort of IP, if you like, ends up in those prompts from years and years of experience that accelerate. But even then, there's that layer on top, which is the human in the loop, validating the outputs and fine tuning, and how do you make this unique for this in this context even further. So it's an interesting process.
It's right. I think we've got these crazy good kind of Happy Days inspired bowling jackets as swag for Move 37. And on the back is inscribed "Human in the Loop" in beautiful embroidered cursive typeface. The interesting thing what you just said there, Gareth, a thing that's come up quite a lot in the last 6 months is, as people get accustomed to using these tools and these models, they start to feel ownership of their prompts, and that has some pros and cons. So obviously in our role, we're trying to onboard people into AI at a company level or a team level, get excited about the use cases, build out things, realize these incredible goals. But with creative people, and it's totally understandable, if they've worked out a way of working that really produces great things and taps into the something that they like to, that maybe they reference certain thinkers or art directors or philosophers or, certain kinds of ways of building in that context, they're not that happy about handing it over to other team members.
No.
And nor do they think that when they leave the company, it's the company's IP, which is really interesting, because I remember there was a guy at Deakin University talked to me years ago. He wanted to do a study on how creative people use Google, because for various reasons, before the internet was a thing, you'd stuck with doing your own primary research and going to the library, and you might read case studies in advertising, but you didn't have like this always on kind of massive database of every single ad ever made. And so Google changed the way people produce stuff, probably probably had more negative consequences than positive, really, that kind of aspect of it. But this is different. This is, you can actually create really interesting perspectives, human and machine, than human or machine alone. And that's the optimistic view of these kind of two entities working together.
What it also suggests, Dave, is that there's a learning curve, because you're learning, based on what you put in, what you can get out of the models and how things get combined and all of these sort of stuff. So can you, like, how do you approach your team and, also your clients doing the requisite learning to get the most out of it?
Yeah, it's a really good observation. So I've never come across a technology that's so hard to describe from the outside in. Like, talking to board members or executive teams, whatever, you can kind of describe the way, Web 2.0 works, or mobile internet, or, databases or whatever. This is not, people don't feel it and sense it and understand it until they touch it. And so it can be tricky to get senior people experimenting, but there's no getting around it. You have to experiment, play, see the cause and effect. It's a cause and effect medium, obviously, this token prediction stuff. And it's not call and response as far as, it's a survey question. It's a session. You're building iterative context in a session. So you need to carve out time. You need to find yourself 20 minutes, 40 minutes, to really explore it. And then, like you say, you learn what works, and you save stuff in GPTs or prompts or documents, or whatever, for later on. Excuse me. And you're right, and that's your own IP. That's your own iterative IP. If you buy into the idea that AI can operate as a second brain, which I think is a bit flawed in the sense that I think it's all just merged into your own kind of experience, then you wouldn't just leave bits of your brain when you left the work. You wouldn't kind of hand that over for anyone else to use. It's far too personal, but it's written down. So unlike other ways, so like when you focus, when you approach a work task, this is one of the hardest things to learn about using LLMs. The LLM doesn't know anything about the job to be done until you tell it. So you've got to provide that context. In other ways of working, you don't have to do that. Like if you start to get a brief from a client, you don't need to tell any third party what this is about. You're already using your intuition. You're already connecting things in your head, but you haven't written it down. And so by writing it down, it makes it very useful for an LLM. But writing it down also makes it observable and readable for anyone else. And it's a weird thing for a lot of people is to document their most personal ways of working.
Have you seen any patterns kind of emerging where people find a balance there? Like, is there a ways of sharing enough from a company perspective, but still retaining some sense of kind of ownership? Like, how are people?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think this is much more evidenced in sort of creative fields. Like when I was saying that sense that my creativity is such important part of who I am, than anything that kind of, my own insights, my own ways of working, my own way I'll approach a problem or an idea feel very personal. That's kind of the minority of most sectors. Most sectors we work in, people, there's a couple of different things. There's kind of three behaviors we're seeing. There's that one where people can be protective of their prompts. There's the other one where people feel like they're cheating and that they'll get found out if they're using AI to do their work. And the third one is they're paralyzed by their own insecurity about that they don't know how to use it. So we uncover a lot of people, probably the majority of people we start working with, who apologize for being behind, who go, all of your clients must be way more, advanced than us. It's just not the case. Like, I don't know about other countries, but observation about Australia is it's very, unevenly distributed, this knowledge. You can go into a workshop or a meeting and, some people say, like, what is it? What's it do? And other people say, I built this on the weekend, and they work in the same team.
Yeah.
But there's this sense that everyone gets it. Everyone gets it and I don't, and they're embarrassed to say it, and therefore they don't start. And so people can get over that hump.
So it's sort of almost a form of imposter syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah, it is actually.
It definitely is, yeah.
We've been talking to folks in the UK and the US, and certainly the indication we get back is that it's the same thing around the world right now.
Yeah,
pockets of people advancing and really, having kind of revelations and really kind of, amplifying the way they build that into their process, and other folks who are taking a little bit longer.
Yeah, a lot of it, Gareth, is getting comfortable with socializing those feelings. So good old round tables. We had a company that had 11:50 a.m. Friday prompt sharing. So for 10 minutes just before lunch, everyone would share their prompts or their learnings. And by making it so niche and weird and obscure a time and only having 10 minutes, it didn't put a lot of pressure on it. So some people would just ask questions, some people would throw in weird shit, some people would like whatever. That worked really well for them. The agency, the Royals, do a monthly get together, kind of a similar thing, but all sitting in a circle, just talking about experiences. It's not like a lecture, it's not a workshop, it's just, talking through what's worked and what hasn't. Yep.
So it's almost thinking about, the approach to the change, if it's a form of change management or, making it more acceptable, normalizing using the tools.
Yeah, totally. We're social creatures, so the more we talk about this openly, the more it makes sense to us.
When people apply to work for Move 37, Are they encouraged or discouraged to using LLMs in their cover letters and resumes?
Good question. I think people need to own their output. So I'm less worried if they've used sort of co-writing tools. If someone, I am against people just generating something and publishing it or sending it, but that is so by degrees. It's obviously a sliding scale. I think people need to go, I am dead set comfortable with every single word that was said and expressed. You could interview me about every word. I will remember it in 2 weeks from now. That is owning the stuff, and there are a lot of ways to get there. There's no shortcut. I mean, I guess one of the biggest challenges we face as a society in relation to this stuff is this kind of this flattening of critical thinking. That's the danger, and I think we know that there's the world has an incredible amount of information, like unending amounts of information. Like you could never get through it all. Like the whole of the human population could never get through reading all the information in the world. Some of that occasionally turns into knowledge, and that's a really useful process. But it's a process. And then some of that knowledge very, very occasionally turns into wisdom. And that is even more a valuable, heartfelt human process. To just compress that and think that you can just generate stuff out of AI, pass it off as knowledge or wisdom, is really dangerous. And I worry about, the kids coming through school using this stuff, but also you can see it's all over, obviously LinkedIn and other places. But if someone's asked to do a job at work and they end up just sort of the job is not to create the PowerPoint. The job is to do the thinking and the analysing. And sure, use LLMs and other tools to do that. That's what we recommend, and there's incredible ways to do that. But it's got to be this kind of hybrid, kind of centaur cyborg way of working in order for you to feel comfortable that that's what you believe and what you think. And that learning, if you're not learning stuff, then you're not going to be better at it next time. So a bit of a long-winded answer to your question. Daniel, we not too fussed about that, but we do have some really cool technical tests to work out how they use all sorts of things.
I love the idea of
fun to see the output.
Yeah, that's right. I love that idea of owning the output. It's certainly something, whether it's documentation, images, code, whatever it is, it's your responsibility to own that output. But in terms of critical thinking,
explain to people, you just kind of go, an AI can't be sued, it can't lose its job, it can't be taken to court. You can. And that's not to say the cover letter is going to end up in any of those things, but it's just a good reminder that there is no consequence, there is no responsibility, and this whole kind of it's almost philosophical debate about who owns the copyright, the AI or you, is ridiculous because it's not embodied. It can't kind of rock up to the Melbourne Magistrates Court in a Holden Commodore and walk up the stairs and kind of stand in front of the magistrate. You can. Sorry, Gareth, I cut you off.
No, that's cool. So I was going to ask, it's an interesting idea about critical thinking and whether that's diminishing or whether we're not exercising those kind of muscles anymore. What recommendations would you give to people, especially maybe people entering the workforce?
I think I answer that question with thinking of my son. So I've got a 22-year-old son, and he's studying film and TV at Swinburne here in Melbourne. Not that interested in AI. I think maybe that's because he hates me. Like I said to him on the weekend, this is like a personal vendetta. He goes, no, don't take it personally. And then he goes under his breath, take it personally. No, I think I just keep encouraging him because in the field he's interested in, which is writing, directing, making things, there's a lot of concentration of tools in these areas. And so I push him to understand that he won't have to accept tools that are distributed to him by music tools, by Logic, or design tools by Adobe or whatever. He'll be a tool maker, and everyone of his generation will have the possibility of being tool makers. In order to make a tool that works for you, remember we shape our tools and thereafter they shape us. You've got to have you've got to have a thought about what kind of tool you want and how that's going to impact your work. And that process of thinking about that is a very, it's a great critical path to understanding what is the kind of work you want to make. So I encourage him to practice communicating your ideas, practice, thinking through your ideas, use LLMs to ask you questions. Like, one of the best, obviously, superpowers is in any kind of critical thinking or creative thinking kind of process or field is the power of asking better questions. And that is for, all three of us, but anyone who's working with clients or knowledge work or whatever, is framing the problem, asking better questions is much more contingent on a better solution than just coming up with the answer straight away. And using AI for that is incredible. Use the Socratic method or use the 5 whys that kids would do, whatever it is. So I encourage people to think about it as an AI thought partner for work, not a search engine, not as a content generator, and to think about, different perspectives. Imagine you said sort of 20 years ago, the whole of the human condition is baked into one bit of software and you can access it, wherever you want, whenever you want, on your own terms, without computer programming, just by talking. Steve Jobs envisaged this. There's clips on the internet of him sort of describing this. I think it's, okay, what would you use that for? What would you use that for? You'd use that for thinking through things, thinking through, your life, philosophy, your relationships, your goals, your ambitions, whatever. You wouldn't use that to write emails. And so
that's right. I think there's a lot of people, I think, using it in that way, kind of accidentally discovering that it's because obviously it's quite private. You can say things that you might not say to another human quite as easily. It's actually quite a powerful mechanism. I know some of our colleagues use it as a collaborator for engineering or architectural design, and they know that they can't accept necessarily the response, but it's the process of actually interacting in that different way. It makes you think differently.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think if you think we're all the sum of our expertise, our experience, our taste, falling out of love, falling into love, being hurt, having victories, whatever it is, we are the sum. We're all very individual sums of those things. We all bring, if we're able to tap into that, we bring very different stuff to any job with an LLM. Very different. You've just got to tap into it. And I think it's useful. There's a wonderful woman named Sari Azout who founded a company called Sublime, which is a really good, I guess, slow internet kind of idea creation, saving, kind of replacing RSS feeds and Pocket and a few other things startup. And she did a talk last month in somewhere in Europe. I think it was Spain or Portugal or something, and kind of said, imagine that artificial intelligence was branded collective intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. That would be quite useful, because what you're getting is the collective human condition. You're getting the collective knowledge. You're getting everything. That's not super specific or interesting unless you tap into the right part of it. So collective does sound broad and bland, and that would be useful for people to understand what it is on the surface. And know, and to remind themselves that they are the ones who need to bring specificity into it, and you can find it and you can get to it, but you've got to work at it. We did an experiment last year called the Dream Machine, and it was based on the premise that hallucinations are all you need. So that seminal machine learning, neural networking paper, attention is all you need, kind of thought, no, you know what? For critical thinking, creative thinking, hallucinations could be considered in a lot of cases a feature, not a bug. And really started to play with what that meant. And what it ended up going into was a really interesting space, which is when you rock up, you've already got these constraints, and that's the nature of sort of any kind of work, knowledge work. And so you've got these constraints. It's very hard to break out of them. So what we did was behind the scenes did some sort of system prompt engineering, which injected random concepts into things behind the interface that the people couldn't see. So as much as they were trying to keep it on rails, it would kind of keep it on rails, but it would kind of slip in these random hallucinations into it, and then offer sort of different opportunities for you to reject that or take it forward. So it was kind of, force feeding lateral thinking into your process.
I love it.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of it's that sort of notion of there's more information in the unexpected than there is in the expected. You know, the evolution,
Totally.
mutation is how how organisms evolve, right? It's the mistakes that give the interesting sort of outcomes, and
Exactly.
it's kind of an interesting idea. Did it work for you? Out of curiosity, did you get good results?
Yeah, it was interesting, and I get a real buzz out of seeing people use things like that. So I used it, and it was kind of on rails. It was like, and then this, and then it would give you some 5 options, and then what would you choose out of this, and then what would you choose out of that. And then when we started to put it in front of people, they would just override the options and just type something like they would be triggered into a different way of thinking just because of the random journey it was taking. And one of them described me, goes, it's like when did orienteering at school. You get a compass and a map, and you've got to find the flag or the target a kilometre away. If you're 1 degree off with your compass readings and you've moved 100 metres, it doesn't matter because you're still going to be able to see where you're going to be. But as soon as you're 1 degree off a few times and you've been walking for a couple of hours, you're in a very different place. So forcing those 1 degrees onto people, obviously there's this notion of temperature, the kind of, when dealing with sort of large language models, high temperature, low temperature, predictability versus randomness, just little things like that into the way we work are super interesting.
Very good. Well, we're getting to around that time of the show. Should we? I think we're all going to be pitched in to provide a bit of a summary, some of the threads, because we've covered a lot. So we started talking about Move 37, and you're helping clients with that sort of AI transformation in some. With others, it's getting in there and working with them to build products. I'm assuming some of those are internal and some of those.
Yeah, a lot of it's internal. Yeah.
Yep. And so some of the things that jumped out to me, the level of agency you have when working with models. So bringing in your context and specificity was the difference between a bland output and an output that was an extension of yourself. And so that carried through to who owned that question, which is probably the first time I've heard it uttered out loud, was like, who owns the IP of the work documented with LLMs? That I think I paused for a minute or two just to have a think about that one. So I think that's a great question we should all be thinking about. And then the other one that jumped out to me was just some of the challenges for people, where they're like apologizing or feeling that imposter syndrome, or just overwhelmed by the amount of movement and feeling like they're really far behind. What stuck out for you, Gareth?
Yeah, look, I think those were great points, and I think also just the idea of bringing it into an organization in different ways. It doesn't have to be the big, purely focused on product. It can be those. I love that sort of share your prompts kind of idea, or and raising the general knowledge and awareness and use at that level, whilst you're tackling other opportunities within the organization as well. I loved the mutation idea, or the randomness, the hallucination idea as well. But yeah, what a great way to create those sort of interesting thoughts, and that inspire people.
Yeah, I think I like the mutation's a great word. That's one of my favorite aspects of that, and I think the evolutionary stuff that you talked about, Gareth, was completely relevant to that project, to see what survives and see the mutations that carry on, etc. Daniel, you mentioned the concept of agency a second ago, which is something we didn't explicitly touch on, but is kind of, I guess, embodied in a lot of this stuff. And what we've noticed is that some people have agency and some people don't feel like they do. And so the incredible the democratization of intelligence and insight that is right in front of you now, the ability to run deep research and discover whole new sectors and ideas and do this lateral thinking, it's right there, yet some people don't do it. And so there's some really interesting kind of thinking going on about, how do people, I guess, acquire a sense of agency? How do people give themselves permission to do the things? Because all around us, people are, and that is at an individual, team, and company level. Like, I've tried to sort of describe to companies, executives at companies to kind of go, the innovation and disruption that's going to come from people being able to quickly build things that you have taken 30 years to build is hard to fathom. And so you don't have a choice. And you would know, being technical people, that anything that was built sort of before the last few years, a lot of it needs to be rebuilt from scratch. You can't just add on generative AI or LLMs into it. And LLMs are a fundamental building block of a lot of different technology now, if we start from today. And so this sense of agency I'm really interested in, because it is a human characteristic, and some people, it's like, it's not a judgment thing. It's just some people that you're surprised to kind of have it. And some people kind of go, you really should have agency. You're a good, bright, curious person. What's holding you back? And the barriers to, acting on that are just diminishing so quickly all around us. It's an interesting perspective on society as a whole, and individuals within society, about how they're acting on that or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's for both individuals and the leadership level. It's like, individually, are you holding yourself back? And for leadership, are you creating, environments which are either supportive of this or work against it? Like, are they taking those change approaches that you were describing that sort of leveled the playing field and made things more acceptable, or are they trying to jump over them and just completely mandate, without any of the things that actually make it possible or comfortable or humane for people to take on?
That's a good point.
And the last theme that we had was around critical thinking, which I think, in terms of a practical takeaway that people can use straight away, tips you had around like using the Socratic method, so I've edited the system prompt on ChatGPT so that when my son and I use ChatGPT, for story time and things like that, it's asking us more questions, and we're adding on things that's creating a story together, as opposed to saying, ChatGPT, just give me a bedtime story. And so I think your tips around that were spot
the other
on.
one I have like that, which I create, which I like, a template I go to sometimes, is some kind of idea bot. You describe an idea, but then you've got these 4 templates, and I've set up macros within the setting system prompt to kind of go, if I press /1/2/3/4, it invokes these templates. And basically the 4 templates are, I describe an idea, and then I say, and then it says riff, reject, research, and abuse or something. And basically, it gives me a high level one-liner for each one of those, but then I hit the number and it goes off in a tangent. So it's kind of like these, I guess, macros, these thinking macros. You can put whatever you want in there, but they're shortcuts to just remind you to go down these avenues and see it from different perspectives, like force a different perspective on it. Ask difficult questions, like question whether it's a good idea. Don't just be a sycophant. Don't just tell me every idea is fantastic. Like this is another danger in critical thinking about how sycophantic LLMs are. But we'll get to that another time.
It's almost like goodbye those hats a lot.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. That, I think, is a pretty good place to wrap up. So thanks so much for your time, Dave. Clearly you've been in this area and thinking about it very deeply for a long time. So some great insights. Really appreciate your time. And
so people can find you at move37.ai. Anywhere else they can find you, Dave?
Yeah, I'm on look for Dave King on LinkedIn. There is a million Dave Kings. I've been on a plane with 2 other Dave Kings once, so not an uncommon name, but I'm the one who works at Move37. Or hit us up on Move37. You can see some of the examples of our work or get in contact.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good timing.
See you later. Catch you next time.
See you.